Good morning, Big Blue World. It's Britt Boles. Welcome to another episode of Blue Biographies. This is episode 3 in a Seed to Story series. And the purpose of this series is to share and hold space and witness the journeys of dyers and of growers and of farmers around the globe. So thanks for joining us live today. I'm really honored to have Debra Ketchum Jircik as my guest today. Hi, Debra.
Hi, Britt.
Thank you so much for being here today. I want to tell you just a little bit about how I know Debra. Debra and I had the pleasure of meeting in real life a couple years ago at the North American Indigo Project. This was in Berkeley, California, and it was a weekend series of workshops and symposiums. It was a wonderful time. We were nerding all about indigo all day long, every day. And my first connection, excuse me, Debra, was on the Facebook group with you, right? Here.
Yes.
And so I was so excited to meet you. I've been very inspired by what you're doing, by your projects with indigo. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm honored to be here and be able to share with our big blue community.
Yeah, big blue community. Okay, so Debra, I'm going to ask you just to tell us a little bit about you, where you live, about the indigo that you grow, how long you've been working with the plant.
Yes, so I live in far northern Wisconsin, and outside a little town called Eagle River, very close to the UP border. And so my growing zone is like zone 3B. My background is in art, but also growing. So I've done a lot with food systems work. I came up in the 70s, you know, for the wave of back to the land people. So for me, wanting to combine indigo with, you know, growing dye with my art practice. I'm a hand paper maker. I've been doing that for about 25 years. And so working with plants, anything to work with plants, and just how can you not fall in love with the color blue? So in all its shades, in all its manifestations. I grow Persicaria tinctoria because I'm in a place where, of course, at zone 3B, I'm a very temperate zone. Woad or Persicaria would really be the plants that would be feasible to grow. And I was up actually for the challenge. I started in 2012. That was the first year I started to grow. Okay.
And I love all the shades of blue behind you. You're representing indigo so well.
Yeah.
Are you in your studio right now? Is this where you?
I am. And it's nice because I have that earthy smell of Sakumo vats behind me, and they are just playing out. And I'll share that element of the story later in the questions, but it's just a delightful time to experience as they are coming towards the end of their lives in terms of yielding color. To be able to experience these shades of blue. And that, you know, again, I think that's part of the beauty of indigo dyeing is we've got the fresh leaf colors, and then we've got all the shades of blue. And you know, if your first adventures were pre-reduced indigo and you went to dark right away with not much variation, it's like when you start to work with natural indigo and you know, your eyes are wide open to the possibilities.
Yes, the variation and the full
Yes.
circle. I love what you're talking about with being there with the earth smells. You're starting your new plants, right? And
Yes.
you've also got the end of the life cycle of your Tsukumo. And that's such a beautiful full cycle journey. And I can't wait to ask you more questions. In fact, on that same vein, can you tell us a little bit about your cultivation rhythm? So when do you start?
Sure.
And
yes.
When do you plant, etc.?
Absolutely. So I want to first acknowledge one of the places that I really learned the most from, and one of the most inspiring people to me doing indigo is Roland Ricketts. And he really, through his project, which was actually finished by the time I became aware of it, but I had bought seeds from him. So the Indigo-Growing Blue project kind of started my journey, and that's where a lot of my knowledge about the plant. But I think, like with every plant, if you're a gardener, you have to learn what it needs. And in northern Wisconsin, where we are, pretty much very, very short growing season. So I need to get my plants under grow lights. And I start germination anywhere from the first week of April through to mid-April. Now this year I'm experimenting. I germinated some other flats a little bit later this year. I transitioned from 72 cell packs to 50 cell packs.
Okay.
And my thinking on that was to maybe have a bigger root ball for, since I was planting in plugs and I don't have a greenhouse that I can just, have individual seedlings that I pluck out. I thought, why not give them the advantage? We don't really have our first or our last frost-free date until usually Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
So end of May, early June is when I start setting seeds out. And I live in the woods. My gardens are kind of surrounded by forest. I've got a lot of raised beds. It's kind of like I don't have a field, but I've got a lot of area that I can plant in. And so I have just little parcels of raised beds and different areas where I'm able to grow the indigo. So I kind of work around that, and pretty much everything goes in at the same time. This year I'll be experimenting again because I started some a little bit later. So
I'll be really excited to check in with you and see how you notice any differences. And are you growing any varietals, any different, or do you mainly just grow one varietal?
Well, I grow 3 that I know of, and you will know the names better than I will now. You gifted me some of the lovely seeds from Tulums, which really appealed to me because I cannot get my plants to flower where I live. And I have brought them into the studio. I have a small studio space. I don't have a lot of good south face light, and it just seems like it doesn't work really well for me to get seeds going. And I know this new variety, do you want to speak about that a little bit, is supposed to flower earlier. So I'm excited. And then I have a red stemmed variety, the one with the bigger leaves. And then I have the small green leaf variety. So those are the 3. And again, one of them I got from Roland. I have a dear friend who lives in southern Wisconsin. And also part-time in northern Wisconsin, but she has been growing out seeds for me every year now. So some of the seed stock is from what I've had from various people I've gotten seeds from, including Grand Prismatic last year, but this year I'm growing my seeds and then Roland Ricketts.
Okay.
So, and the ones you gave me from Tulums.
Yes, I'm very excited about those too. I do know a little bit. I do know that Roland has said that he grows the Senbon, the Kujoko, and a hybrid. So that doesn't really narrow it down for us, but it's helpful information. And I recently learned, actually, from Lisa, who will be joining us later in the season, that there's actually 2 different types of Kujoko. So there is a white flowering Kujoko and there's a pink flowering Kujoko. And then there's the Senbon, which is usually a little smaller leaf. It's rounder, less tapered, which also flowers pink. There is another one I won't attempt to pronounce because I've never heard of it before, but it starts with an H. hopefully she'll share some more when she comes on to chat with us. Her pronunciations are much more accurate.
And Lisa, what is her Instagram?
She is Indigo Blue Fields.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know her?
Great.
Yep.
Well, that's very exciting.
Yeah. And then what I can tell you about the Two Looms varietal is that it was sent to him from Okinawa, from his sericulture mentor. And she said it was a northern early flowering varietal. So I don't know if that means it actually came from Okinawa, because Okinawa is a southern island. But what she knew of it was that it was especially good for northern climates because it was flowering earlier in the season. So it also has a crinkle leaf. So he's been calling it the Okinawa ripple leaf, or affectionately the Omak crinkle leaf, because he's growing it up north near almost Canada, but northern Washington. So he's experimenting also, and kind of in the same position you are, Deb, where you're up north, your growing season, your window of light is shorter. And so how can we harvest those seeds? It will be really, really exciting to see how it does for you, especially. And I hope that it goes well because harvesting your own seeds is so exciting. Harvesting the source and having that for next year. Not that it isn't wonderful to get, wonderful seeds from all over the world, from really wonderful people like Roland and Grand Prix, and I'm so thankful for them. And Adam will be selling this seed. I've had a lot of people asking, like, where do I get this seed? He will be selling this seed next season. So he hopes to harvest more seed this season to have it available on the Two Looms website for people. So that won't be till next, late winter, probably early spring is when you can look for those.
Wonderful.
Thank you for sharing about your rhythm and your all the different plants that or the varietals that you're growing, and about your new experiment. So can you also now go into, we've been teasing everyone with this, tell us more about the tsukumo, and am I pronouncing that correctly? I know that.
Well, I've heard it pronounced many ways, and yes, it's what I've heard mostly is, you usually have your vowel sounds even, but I also was, people were pronouncing it skumo, so kind of blending that. Okay. So, probably just talking faster. Sure. So skumo is how I've been pronouncing it. Okay.
So yeah, can you tell us about that method?
So because again, I was following Roland, and I'm very interested in Japanese cultural traditions, and also it seemed like a natural fit for me as someone who likes to compost. It seemed like a logical way to go, even though I knew that the way it was done in Tokushima was to have massive amounts, and that's the way Roland does it and the way he was taught to do it. I wanted to experiment, and I had asked on the Growing Blue Facebook page if anybody had tried other ways. Now there's a woman who, I think she does the Indigo Shibori group, Kathy Bullington, and I think she's been on the indigo pigment extraction groups. She had a blog talking about where she posted this, because this was before, we have to think this is before John Marshall came out with a book. So finding information in English was very, very hard to find. And Roland said, well, I've never done it, because I had asked on the Indie Growing Blue page, but you can try, people have tried coolers. And what Kathy Bullington had done, I think, was she had a styrofoam cooler. And, those are the kind of things we really don't want to even be living, but you can find them at a, secondhand store. You're keeping it out of the landfill and repurposing it. So I had a big one that I used. And basically, where I got my first information was I took the information about what Kathy had done and then applied what I had read about the traditional way of doing it. And then of course, Boiso was great at having a lot of information out there as far as on Instagram, images of their process and how many days in between, before they would turn. So I kind of used their method at first about once a week. I filled this with, I think my first year, I maybe did 4 pounds of dry leaves. So think you're de-stemming. And I just want to again put out a shout to check out the archive of Indie Growing Blue. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody wants to send me a message on Instagram if you're serious about wanting to do this. But what I was going to say is you want to at least have 5 pounds of dry de-stemmed leaves to do this. I think I maybe did 3 pounds the first year, and I wrapped them in a gauzy cloth, and then I lined it similarly. Now I know other people in the group since have kind of figured out ways where they're putting clay and they're trying to make like the netico, I think that's what you call the room that you compost with the special floor. So, but I did rice hulls around my bag of the dried leaves, and then I wet them with hot water, which was a tip I got from Kathy. And so I did that at first, and using kind of the intuition of building a compost pile, right? You want it more like a damp sponge. You don't want it soaking wet, dripping, because it's going to start decomposing anyway and get wet. Right. Which is why we have these layers underneath to absorb that moisture as it decomposes. So I was doing that like about once a week. I had it behind I heat with wood. Another thing, again, I like about this is I know like you and other people do the water processing, like in summer, because we have such a short season and we're doing everything at once. It's like, I thought that doesn't fit. I like the cyclical rhythm of, I can do the scumo in winter, or in late fall. So I had it behind my wood stove to keep it warm. I had it wrapped, I want to tell you that it doesn't give off a really bad smell. I had it more like anaerobic, in the sense that it was covered. Okay. And so that kind of helps retain the heat. I had my compost thermometer. I can tell you it does not get as high of a temperature as you would if you had that massive pile in the traditional way that it's done in Tokushima. But that's kind of how I got my start on doing the scumo. And I did successfully, and again, I'm judging this through pictures, right? I haven't laid hands on anybody else's Sakumo. I'm using what I can see from someone else's images, and I'm like going, okay, this smells like it's done. The heat drops just like when you're composting. This stuff must be done. I did change my methods this year, and I think I went to Japan. I was very fortunate to, in 2017, I'm a member of the Surface Design Association, and I applied for a grant. They have something called a personal development grant. And I thought, okay, this is the year I'm going to go to Japan. And that helped me to, I did get the grant. It helped to pay my way. And when I was there, I was at a place called Japanese Textile Workshops. And Brian Whitehead is an amazing artist and teacher. And a lot of people have been there and have written about it. I wrote about it in the recent Surface Design Journal. But I met his assistant at the time, is the person who really taught me the most when I was in Japan about doing scumo. Because when I did go to Boyson, I was more like I was there, I could observe it. But I learned because he was there at Brian's, I got to watch him because he was teaching like seed to dye to local people. And they were there, and it just happened. I was badgering Brian a little bit, nagging him about really wanting to see that, because that was really what I was most passionate about learning about. I loved everything I learned, and it helped to broaden my understanding in cultural context of indigo. But it was being able to learn about small scale. He was doing smaller scale than the giant amounts. And so I was able to observe that it was happening, that it's possible, and it was a confirmation. And we've stayed in touch. And in fact, he came to Wisconsin this past fall. And I gathered people from Wisconsin, basically, who were interested in indigo dyeing, because I feel like we miss being at the coast. We're in the stereotypical flyover zone. So it was a way for me to share with my immediate community an experience that likely many of us wouldn't have. And then he also worked in our community through our local community college, who was his formal, host. And so I've learned a lot from him, and I varied my technique from him, and he is proprietary about it right now, but I can share a couple things about it. And I also will tell you, he is going to be, do you know how to pronounce Suzanne Connor's place, studio down in Florida? Aya studio.
I don't know the pronunciation.
Okay, well, Suzanne's in our group. Well, Suzanne has this studio, and she has teachers there. And in 2021, he will be coming to Florida to teach the Scumo along with Katazome. So that's an opportunity to learn from him. And I think if he got feedback, because I think with all of us kind of who are teachers with the situation now, we're having to find new ways to teach. I think he's really considering going online to teach Scumo. And I think the more that I hear positive from our group and from you, he would, he's really considering, because of course, like everybody, people aren't coming to study with him there. And, it's just a time of change. So I do want to share a little bit about what I learned. And that was that the best practice would be to increase. And I guess that's logical. The more volume, the more mass you have, the better. And I had 5 years worth kind of saved up. Every year I kind of bank part of my dried leaves. Of course, like all of us, don't we love the harvest? And I didn't bring this up, but in Wisconsin, I harvest late July, early August, my first cutting. And of course, we have to celebrate with fresh leaf dyeing. Yes. And so then I have a second, usually late September is my second. So I usually only get 2 cuttings in with our growing season because the frost usually hits. But I think we had like 9 or 10 kilo, of leaves that we processed. And you have one of the photos from us, because there were still little bits of, we clean everything, but we still had little bits of stem, and we wanted to remove as much as possible. I don't know if I'll be able to do it to be able to show you. Can you see it?
That's the compost.
That's the compost I did this year from his visit.
It's black gold. It's like gold.
Yeah, it is like gold. And you know what's funny is and that's probably me because I'm learning how to process it, but it's like these little nuggets almost. Mm-hmm. I've heard that, I think Roland said he kind of has I don't know if he uses a shredder to chop it up later. I don't know what ideally this would be. It'll still break down enough in the vat. And so this took 2 months versus usually we think, I think it's 120 days traditionally.
Sure.
So this was 2 months of, let's say, 9 to 10 kilo. And then I have enough to do like a 32-gallon vat. And I want to tell you, like, he came in a late September, early October. So he left. So these vats have been giving color now. And right, it's May. So they still are giving color. And they get fed every month with.
And when did you start the vats? Did you say that?
They were the first one was started on September 11th. I just looked at my notes beforehand. And the really cool thing about Takayuki, who by the way is his Awonoyo is his Instagram handle. And I can't remember, it's blues. Well, you can, if you read my article in the Surface Design Journal, and eventually I haven't gotten to it, I'm going to put it up
on your website.
My website.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So anyway, he, even though I speak English and 5-word vocabulary of Japanese, and he doesn't speak a lot of English, he does really well. And we've just had this friendship. So what I wanted to say is he walked me through the first vat. I had everything to make it. And then he walked me through on Instagram, which again is the beautiful thing about this technology, that we can be connecting with each other all over the world, right? And developing friendships through Facebook, through Instagram. So anyway, I'm excited to, what I wanted to say about the Tsukumo as well is once it's done, you want to let it dry and age. So whether you've done it in the cooler or whatever, after it's done, it's another step to let it age for 6 months. And then you can make the vat. So about the time I'm watering outside with these vats, I'll be starting the new one. So,
oh, that's beautiful. I love that cycle.
Yeah.
And it's so encouraging for people to hear that this small scale composting is viable, that it's possible.
Absolutely.
It's very encouraging to hear just how generous people were with sharing, even at Boasu, to say, yes, we do it on this scale, but here's our process. And
well, and I want to put out another thing that Boisa, one of the women that works there, she is their business manager. When we were there, we just took a mini workshop, and I know there's been so much expansion of the way they're teaching now, and they're doing longer classes. But when we went, we were able to do just a short one. And I'm saying because one of my really dear friends, who's a quilter and natural dyer, decided to join me on the trip, which was so great to share that amazing experience together. But one of my favorite books I was turned on to while I was there, and of course it's harder to get it here, but it's Awa Natural Indigo.
Will
and
you
I think
show
I've
it
talked
up
about
to the
that
camera?
on. Can you see it?
Can you show it a little closer?
How's that?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Yes, Awa Natural Indigo. And can you say the author's name?
I can try. Miyoko Kawahito. Miyoko Kawahito.
I'll write
and if anybody wants to find out, I think if you go through the, not the files, but just do a search on the Facebook group, this has been discussed, and there's a link to where you can buy it.
Okay, I'll find
it's still very inexpensive. Where you'll get hit is, of course, paying the postage.
Sure.
But that coupled with, when I built my first 2 vats with my small amounts of Tsukumo, I was able to do, first one I did was 5 gallon. The second one was 10 gallon. And I used the directions from the indie growing blue community vat. If you go on Roland's Facebook group, which is still up and running, you just go through the archives. He has photos step by step. And of course, his Ricketts Indigo also is just, he's done some updates, and you know, there's so much sharing going on there. And as I said, I'm happy to share what I've learned with people as well. But I was going to say that this book has details and is very nice, nicely laid out. And I have gotten feedback from, and I'm sure you have too, with the vats of your own blue. I'm also, by the way, a big fan of Stony Creek colors, which we all love, and the work Sarah Bellows does there. And when I'm teaching, I usually buy, you know, of course, indigo from there. But because we had leftovers in these vats, and I had students hear this, we all were marveling at the beautiful color from the scumo vats. So, and I'm sure you feel that way about yours. I mean, it's just and it's like where they're growing, it's almost like, is there a terroir? I don't know. To you know, what soil where things are grown in. You know, you actually went as far as to have all your materials from where you live, you know. I learned a lot about wood ash lye. For those of you that are exploring making your own wood ash lye, I haven't figured out all the troubleshooting there, but if you're interested sometime in learning about that,
I am.
Yes.
Wonderful. This is such a wealth. This is just a deep dive well of knowledge about this process. I'm so excited to like really open this up. There's so many questions about
good
on the group about people, you know, dry leaves. What do I do with my dry leaves? I didn't have time to process my leaves. They're dry. And so I feel like this is like the next chapter that I'm wanting to jump into, because I have never done the composting on any scale. So I'm so grateful that you're here to share with us and willing and just available.
It's my pleasure. I'd love to do that.
Thank you. And can we, or could you rather, just explain to people, indigo has so many veins, right? So many directions you can go. So just for people who aren't familiar at all with any of the processes, could you just briefly describe, like, what does it mean to use a plant fresh? What does it mean to extract pigment versus what does it mean to do what you're doing mainly, which is your focus of drying and doing the sukumo?
Right. Well, I may let you chime in about the water process.
Sure.
I do want to put out also a shout to Corey Hargreaves. Is that how we pronounce her last name? Hargreaves?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes. So I can't remember what her Instagram.
Ecotone Threads.
Ecotone Threads. She was one of the first people to post about the water process method. Yes. And also the fantastic group of fiber shed people pioneered a lot of this work. And again, a lot of the written stuff when I was starting to explore wasn't there. So I was just like, you know, trying to figure it out. But the thing I want to say is my understanding is both the African way, like the Mali processing and the woad processing, and the composted leaf processing have some similarities, right? Because we're relying on the microbial life from composting to create the atmosphere, the right conditions to release that pigment. We're both concentrating the color. And I mean, it's similar, it's parallel to what you're doing. We're concentrating color. Now, fresh leaf is an adventure unto itself. And I think the best thing to do when you're growing indigo is to experience the many different phases. And you get those beautiful teals, and you can add like, I learned this from Roland, who learned it from one of his teachers. You can add like grape juice and pickling lime, or if you have shell lime, and do on cellulose, because of course the fresh leaf is best on silk or animal protein. I haven't done any on wool with it, but you know, the colors, and what I'm finding too is it's almost like an indicator of how much, it seems to me, it indicates how much blue is in those leaves. Have you noticed that? How you get almost a darker blue teal? Some years it's more aqua, and I feel like those are weaker leaves.
I absolutely notice a difference too, just when I do my fresh in the season. So when I do my first fresh versus when I do my last fresh experiment, it's definitely different. I feel like I'm getting more of the green chlorophyll right at the beginning of the season. You know, the indican content is not quite there yet, or the precursor chemical is maybe, you know, still developing. And it is interesting to know a little bit more about the science of when and how the leaves produce the pigment precursor chemicals. Some of what Corey has mentioned to me is that the young leaves do have a lot of indican content versus some of the older leaves. We talk a lot about, you know, once a plant is flowering, is the harvest over? Is it still producing any pigment? Is it worth it? I always think it's worth it, like worth it to play, right? It's worth it to get something versus nothing, is my humble opinion. But it definitely, as it gets towards seed producing time, it's dropping. You know, the indican levels are starting to drop. Would you still want to harvest? I think so. If you're just a person at home who's saying, yeah, I want to get pigment to play with, absolutely. But yeah, I would love to know more about this particular, anything you have to share on that, this particular.
On what aspect? About the concentration?
Leaves, yeah, the concentration in the leaves, if you know.
Well, you know, I feel like I'll say one thing I've noticed, and this again is through, I mean, like what I like to say to anybody about any plant is you're learning the plant. You're getting to know each other, and you want to get to know your plant and what it needs. And it took me a little while to figure out, and this again, I learned from Roland, foliar feeding and every couple weeks is really gonna help a lot. You know, there are certain elements, obviously, we don't have a lot of control over. If it's a really overly rainy or a drought year, or too cold, or not enough sun, but we can help the plants by giving them some feed. And after that first cutting, giving some nitrogen rich compost, or if you've got a pelleted organic like chicken manure or something like that, that seemed to really make a huge difference in the indican content. And then again, I want to say every year is different. Right. So it's like when I do that, you know, but I think consistently, to me, the tail end where you're getting more towards, there's putting energy into flower. If you do the last cuttings, like I got an example. One of the other people who really inspired me to get back into dyeing from the tie-dye days of the 70s with Britt dye to was India Flint. So I do a lot of eco printing with over dyeing with indigo with fresh leaf, and so that you know is more like a later season color, which I think is just beautiful. This is on a wool gauze. Oh,
that's really beautiful.
So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that later, why not use the pigment from there? I mean, I think I'm not producing, you know, I understand for somebody who's producing for sales and needs a consistent lot, let's say.
Right.
It's different than somebody who's working smaller scale, doing more one of a kind things. So Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so interesting to observe the seasonal, just year to year.
Yeah.
I like to
And
say it's like being, a little bit of like a wine vintner. You're collecting. I love that you use the word terroir. I heard
yeah.
someone else use that similar term. I think it was actually Erica who used it, and saying that all of these factors play a big role. And
Absolutely.
so I love what you were saying about getting to know the plant personally, developing a relationship with it. Indigo especially, I think.
Yes.
Not that all plants aren't interactive, but indigo is especially interactive in that it's not going to produce this blue on its own, just sitting there as a plant in the wild. You might see very little hints of it, when a bug eats the leaf and you get that blue rim.
Yes.
But generally speaking, an indigo vat isn't self-producing itself. So that interaction level of getting to know this living, breathing blue, they call it the living blue.
Yes. Right.
So important.
I did want to interject. You were saying about, doing scumo with dried leaves, and people in the group and others that, don't have maybe time to use their leaves or to do water processing in the summer or during the season. That's a great opportunity to collaborate. And what would it look like and I think that was really the hope and intention. And I think some people do, I'm not sure if that happens now, but with Roland's project, that people could grow and then bring all their indigo to dried leaves. And like for small scale, if you could even in a small group come up with 20 pounds of leaves to do, come together as a community, and then you could share your community vat made with the scumo. What a great way for everybody to share and to learn about the process.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah. We're inspired to do that this year. We're inspired by you. We're inspired by, and when I say we, I mean the people that I work with here in Oregon.
Excellent.
We're going to combine our dry leaves to do a communal adame or sukumo. We're not sure exactly which route we'll go, whether it be in bags to make into little cakes or compost.
Yeah.
We're experimenting with that this year. And we're really inspired by the fiber shed you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So Craig Wilkinson will be on the series later in the summertime.
Excellent.
And he does that. He provides a place for basically a cooperative of farms to bring their leaves, and growers farms, to bring their leaves together. They weigh them, and then so they know how much they contributed, which is nice. So when they have all the leaves together, processed, destemmed, which is probably the hardest part of all of that, right, Deb?
Excuse me, I guess it made me cough. It must be.
A visceral reaction.
It's kind of, it's made hard by maybe the elements, like when you're drying, which is another aspect. Do you dry out on a tarp? And then you can thresh it with your feet and pretty much clean off all the leaves. But if you got 20-mile-an-hour winds that day, or I can't tell you how many times I've decided, I'm going to leave them dry and then I'm going to quick run into town, which is 10 minutes away. And a rainstorm comes out of nowhere. So, and then seasonally, if you have a rainy season, maybe you do want to just bundle and hang. So that's mostly what I do now, is bundle and hang to dry, just as a little added tip. You might have the perfect climate though to dry really fast on tarps. But yeah, you need to get those stems out because that's just more, especially, I'm sure it's the same with your process. If you're composting, you've got all that stuff, extra stuff in there, which isn't broken down, as quickly, let's say, isn't concentrated. And of course, the stem in Persicaria doesn't have any blue to it. So
right. So that's important for folks to know if they're thinking about drying, is that the blue is or, you know, it's the same when you're doing the extraction. While the whole plant is going into the water, we're not leaching any pigment from the stem. All that precursor chemical is coming from the leaf with this plant.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
And I could just talk about this all day long. And if anyone who's viewing has questions, feel free to comment. Feel free to ask Deb directly. And we'll have a little Q&A kind of closer to the end, just so we can answer all the questions together. But thanks so much for watching and commenting and asking about this process. Is anyone here going to be attempting or has attempted doing the compost method? We'd love to hear your feedback, how it's gone for you. Doug earlier commented that he's doing his in a cooler with ceramic plaster in the bottom. It keeps the heat even. He only is using leaves, no stems. And he says, when are we going to Florida? Actually, a lot of people say, when are we going to Florida? 2021, right?
Right, 2021, mark the calendar.
Okay.
I'm hoping to go along and assist, so I get to see y'all.
That would be wonderful. I love that you've been mentioning a lot of people who've encouraged you. You've been mentioning a lot of sources and resources. I'm going to do a little post after the live. Good. I'll try to link as many things as I can. If you want to help me do that afterwards, you can.
I'd love to.
Say that.
I'd love to.
And anyone else who has resources about composting, about this method of, or using dry leaves, how do you use dry leaves? We want to hear about that. I feel like you've already given us a lot of advice for first-time growers. I love that you mentioned that you just need to play and get to know the plant. Is there anything else really critical that you would say, like to a first-time grower of indigo, of this?
If you're not an experienced grower of plants and you're kind of just diving in with dye plants, I start with a soilless mix, which has like composted leaves and I know we're trying to discourage peat use, but I'm sure it has some peat in there, and it's made for organic growers, and it's made in Wisconsin. So try to find a local organic source. For those of you that live in the South and areas, I mean, I don't know, maybe you can direct seed there. I have no idea. I'm just going by a very, very short growing season. So I have to start, and I start in a soilless mix. And I start out, because this already has some organic food in it, but if you start with something that doesn't, you know, the first leaves, you know, that little seedling is gonna be really happy and happily fed on what's inside the seed. But then when it starts to develop true leaves, you want to think about maybe once a week doing a kelp feed or something like that. One discovery I wanted to share with all of you is I've, you know, been growing plants under grow lights, because I think starting from seed, any plant is my favorite part. But I have just graduated from the long ballast grow lights, you know, makeshift that I've been doing for the last decades, to LED grow lights. And I really love them because I don't have to have my light as close. You know how you have to have them if you have indoor lights. You start up with just a couple inches above your seedling. So instead, you've got, depending on the intensity of the light, you can go anywhere from 6 inches to a foot away. So that means you can really more easily watch your little seedlings growing and so forth. So those are just a couple of bits of advice for people.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, like you said earlier, it's so different where you're growing. If you're in a southern climate, if you're in a northern climate, you really just have to experience it. So
Yes.
someone might comment on the group, this is what works for me. But if
Yes.
they're not in your growing zone, you might have a totally
Exactly.
different world over there. Doug did
I
mention
know.
in Alabama,
Yeah.
he can direct seed, in the South. So
Oh,
that is a
wonderful.
possibility for some people.
I can believe that. And you've shared this before. I am similar to you. I do about 8 to 10 seeds, even with like the 50 cell pack that I'm using now. I do about 8 to 10 seeds. And then that's my unit that I plant out when it's time to plant.
Yes. Yeah. I find too, they do well with the support of each other.
Yeah.
And would you tell us about, I feel like you have done a lot of explaining and diving into the why. I can see the passion and just the glow on your face when you talk about plants.
I love talking about
compost. But would you share with us the big W, the big why you grow indigo?
Well, you kind of fall in love with it. Okay. Because my intention with my art is I like to connect with the natural world, not so much in what I depict, but, in a very direct, representational way. But it's a very important part of my practice, and important part of what I'm teaching is I want to have that connection with the natural world. And so indigo satisfied that for me, starting to grow my own plants. And like I said, I came up in an era of that was sort of, you growing your own food, coming out of food systems work, also coming out of, just inspired by Fiber Shed, Rebecca Burgess, having a very holistic sort of way. And also Roland reflects that the process, it's not just the end result. I think those of us that are attracted to growing the plant, and yes, you fall in love with it. Maybe at the beginning, it's an experiment and you're attracted to the blue that you see people produce, but then you do kind of fall in love, and just, it's phenomenal to experience all the different shades of blue and colors. And what this plant get, it opens up, I think, a sense of wonder for any of us. So I guess that's why I keep growing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does pull you into so many connectors with, the community. I feel like it is such a communal plant. We talked about this before, but being not really a solo, I suppose you could absolutely get a lot out of a solo adventure with indigo, but it has this sensibility that it really wants more from not just you, but you need people. You need a community to get more leaves, to get enough. You need, more hands to help you. You need more advice, more generosity, more sharing, right?
Well, and I think I see that in other elements of like food work, because you can't farm by yourself. You know what I mean? So I see some overlapping things, but how can you not fall in love with that color? Along with, sharing with community, being in community with nature. It's powerful stuff. And again, as a hand paper maker, I love anything super process oriented, and where I'm working with the plants and taking them through the whole cycle. So all of that stuff really appeals to me.
That's beautiful. And I want to hear more about the paper that you make in conjunction with your indigo. But I also want to ask, are there any other dye plants that you grow, or are you exclusively focusing on indigo this year?
I do, and it changes from year to year. Like I've got a lot of stuff in jars. I don't have that wall visible, but I've got a lot of dried plants. And this year, because last year I bought the Tangerine Cosmos. I can't remember if that's the name of the variety from Grand Prismatic Seed, but that plant just gave and gave and gave. So I'm growing that again this year. I tried woad, and because of what I read about it being invasive, and I'm like, no, I've got my blue plant that I'm in love with, and I'm gonna stick with Persicaria. I've grown like just different cultivar plants. Like this year I'm not, but purple basil is lovely. Sage can be lovely. But this year I think I'm just going to do marigolds, the tangerine cosmos. I'm not even going to grow well this year, although again, it's the tried and true. Everybody loves it. It does well, because I also have to consider, I'd love to grow madder, but I tried it here in a container and it was just like too much work. And I learned from my friends who have a CSA, like, and are sustainable farmers doing regenerative agriculture. Just, this is clearly not the place for that. So yeah, I kind of am working then with some of the wild plants, some of the invasives. For example, tansy makes a beautiful yellow. Yes. So I'm relying on foraging things like tansy and some of the other sources for yellow. So kind of combining foraging, of course, in the honorable harvest way, and then just I'll have indigo. Oh, and black. I have to have my black, Hopi black sunflower plants, but usually the birds and the squirrels beat me out. So those I try every year. They're beautiful anyway.
Have you done any netting with the sunflower?
You know, I have, but it's really, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's crazy. Just let them have it. You know what I mean? It's so if I get a handful, you know, yeah.
Last year, my sunflower row was an offering. It was
nice.
The birds and the squirrels. I would have liked to get a few, but I didn't. I love also what you're saying about working in collaboration with not just where you live, but with the other factors, you know. What some people would say is a pest is also something that you have to, you know, just consider. That's their life cycle. And if they're going to get the seeds, they're going to get the seeds. I love that mentality of, you know, the good, responsible foraging, looking at not just what can I take from nature, but what can I give, and how can I do that in a way that regenerates the plant instead of just harvesting all of the plant. I think those are really important things, because there are so many people right now looking, you know, they want to explore natural dyes. They don't have a garden. They don't want to buy something online, but they've got open green spaces around them. How do they go in, you know, to those places with a responsible, ethical, you know, harvesting mindset is really important. Not taking more than, everyone has different views of this, but maybe not taking more than 20% of the plant, or if it's a per leaf thing, you know, thinking about how many leaves are left, how many you're going to take. Especially lichen is a big harvesting thing.
Oh my gosh.
Here. Yes. And never taking from the host, meaning never taking from the tree, never taking from the rock that it's growing on. It takes hundreds of years, right? We're doing a little bit of a tangent here, but I think it's important.
But no, I mean, it is. It's absolutely true. And have you read Braiding Sweetgrass? Robin Wall Kimmerer's book. So she talks about the honorable harvest. And I think my first teachers on all of that, of course, are my friends, my Indigenous friends who live around me, as far as really following that.
Yes, they're wonderful examples of co-creating and tending with the natural resources around, right?
Yeah, with respect and reverence.
Yeah, and that that sort of spirit, I think, allows you to have a really great relationship with plants that you forage and with plants that you grow, because you're paying attention. You're just paying them respect and attention. Is a a cyclical circle way of living and growing plants, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you for mentioning that. So the other thing this is really just tying into is what impact has indigo had on you and your community? So kind of your little sphere there where you live.
Well, I think I've probably, through teaching and through my passion and residencies and so forth, I think probably more people are interested in the magic of color and growing their own plants for dyeing, and also realizing that you don't have to, go crazy and have as many, plots of indigo. You don't have to grow a whole field of it. You can have containers, big, and I take advantage of all the places where I have sun that I can, and I have a deck outside my studio, and I have large containers of indigo. So I mean, there's so many ways to work with it. I did actually hope at the beginning that I would have something similar to fiber shed. However, whether it's the geographical distance of people around here or the personality types, that was harder to do, but we do have like our group sharing, coming together and sharing ideas and stuff. And I do have people that'll come and help harvest. So I think through community, I've been able to share my passion for it. And that's always really important to my process, to be able to share what I'm doing in community. So
yeah. And thank you for sharing with me. This is how we met. We met here in this community, and you shared so much with me. I was so excited to meet you when we went to Berkeley together, and continued our friendship through this, this plant, really. And so it's just wonderful to hear about the different ways that you get to know people through this plant. I've gotten to know so many dear friends just through the connection of wanting to grow this plant or wanting to dye with this plant. You mentioned so many great resources. I'll make sure that we add a list, like I said, at the end. A lot of people are commenting like who was the first person to kind of introduce you. You mentioned Roland Ricketts was a really key, that was a question that was just asked.
Yes, really yes. And I would say, I do want to put a shout out for my papermaking friend and teacher, Mary Hark. If you've seen the book True Colors, she talks about indigo in there, and her indigo paper is beautiful. She has been, certainly an inspiration as far as hand paper makers in my life. She was one of my first teachers back in the 90s. We met she was at Minnesota Center for Book Arts, and she teaches at UW-Madison. But she's really a hands-on person. That's her. She's done amazing projects. Check her out. Check out her work. Hark Handmade Paper, I think, is on Instagram. She does do production, so she doesn't do like the kind of indigo dyeing like I'm doing, but her work is exquisite in her use of natural dyes. I had two other, just because you can see I've kind of taken sort of the Japanese tradition path, and I wanted to share with you for a resource. I don't know how many of you have heard of Ayano Chiba. She was a living treasure in Japan, and I guess she's still a treasure, but she's no longer with us. This magazine from the 90s, Piecework magazine, was devoted to blue. And if you can find it on eBay or someplace, I'll tell you the issue is, let me see. I know it's I want to say 1994. Let me see if I can get that information for you. It's
Yeah.
volume 2, number 5, September, October 1994.
Oh,
So
excellent.
there's some wonderful things in there. And this book is really amazing. If you're interested in trying to get a hold of this, it's called The Living Treasures of Japan. There's several people, including Ayano Chiba. And so it's beautifully illustrated. Of course, you've talked about John Marshall's book, and it's a fabulous research. What a gift that he put that together, right? Because, you know, some of these other things are a little bit harder to get your hands on, and you wind up, you know, I think Rebecca Burgess's books, the new book on Fiber Shed, all of the resources from Fiber Shed are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so inspirational for us to take that knowledge into our ecosystems. And I think it's really incredible.
Yes, those are some wonderful resources. I hadn't seen the Piecework magazine. I'm definitely going to seek that out. Yes. And I will, again, I'll try to compile a list of all your amazing resources. Thank you, Debra, that you've given us. So that will be, and it'll be in the replay area when we have this video available after the live session is over. You'll be able to click on those links, and you can always send Debra a message too. She's a wealth of knowledge. Before we wrap up and just talk into any or check on the Q&A section, would you share just, this is the free-for-all section where you just get to share any story, any experience, anything that comes to mind that's really special regarding indigo?
I guess what comes to mind right now, because I've been, you know, during this time of social isolation, I live out in the woods anyway, but there's always a part of my life that I'm out with people because I do teach and I like working in community. But I have watched, it's just given me great peace several times to rewatch. If any of you have seen Textile Magicians, it's a wonderful film on Vimeo. Okay. And there's a short video by the director about Hiroyuki Shindo. He's in this video. And if you don't know Hiroyuki Shindo, he should be a national living treasure in Japan. I got to go to the Little Indigo Museum, which is a must do if you get the opportunity to go to Japan. And for those that have been there, you know, if you've been there, what an amazing experience and what a generous, kind, just passionate person he is. Anyway, what I was going to say, I've been watching those over, and so I've been experimenting with, it helps me relive visiting him and just his passion and he created so many tools, and he has an artist head too, because he came up in that background, but he again is like somebody like Boiso for this generation, where he wanted to revive and keep alive the indigo tradition, the traditional indigo. So he loves to share with people. But in this little video, what I was going to say, what excited me is his process that he created based on some old shibori type, which was much more spontaneous, to me, almost more Zen feeling of taking a tray of stones and manipulating them, and then having little pools where you fill with indigo. So I've been playing with that, which has been really fun and satisfying in this time. And so the indigo story, I guess I would say, was going to this beautiful village outside of Kyoto, and just, you know, being filled with the spirit and the sense of gratitude for the kindness and generosity of so many people on the indigo path. So
That's beautiful. It's so wonderful to we have access to these time capsules via videos and our Facebook memories even. I'm just so grateful for these tools right now that we can
Yes.
reminisce. That's a lovely, that's a really lovely experience and story to be a part of. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes.
I want to just check in on our question section and see if we haven't already answered something. I think some of these we have gone over.
Okay.
We did talk about the Japanese indigo that blooms earlier. So this northern early flowering varietal will be available 2 Looms. 2looms.com is the website. He will be selling this next season. So if you're looking for those 2021, winter, spring is when those seeds are going to be available. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a direct source. Otherwise, he would definitely share from Japan, but he will be making seeds available here in the US. You'll have to ask him about his shipping methods, if he can ship international or not. You always want to check in on that. And then let's see, we did talk about why you grow indigo and what do you put in the bottom of your cooler? So do you put anything now in the bottom?
No, but now that you mentioned Doug tried putting the clay in the bottom, that would be a really fun experiment. Now, I think my next time doing it, I'm not going to have to, I used up all my 20 pounds of leaves. I think I'm going to have about 6 or 7 pounds this year. So I'll probably do the cooler again. But now I've got this additional knowledge from working with Takayuki. And so that will help me to consider how I'm moving forward, even though I won't have the same volume. So I want to experiment with like what happens if I put the clay in the bottom and so forth. So my passion. Did I answer the question?
Yes, sorry. I was checking in on my phone. That's how I'm viewing your questions here.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it started the live video over again. So hopefully that wasn't too disruptive. So someone also asked, our dear friend Bernadette asked about your paper making and how you combine that with indigo pulp. Are you using the pulp from the leaves? Are you using the stems?
I have done paper making with the stems and it's really quite lovely. That was kind of an early on experiment, but what I do primarily is I use flax, and I grew some flax last year, but I'm not growing my own flax. I use other plants, but I've got some samples which are kind of hard to see, but maybe if I hold them up. So this is dyed with a scumo. This is and I like all the wrinkly and sort of, I don't dry them real flat. I dry them, they're made out of flax.
That's
so
beautiful.
It's flax fiber. And I've worked with other fibers too, but it just happens I had tons of flax. And I'm really looking for this, if you can see it, because one of the things that attracted me, well, one of the many things I've been fond of inspired by our like the mending practice of the Boro textiles, and that has influenced. I've worked with stitching on my paper for a long time. So anyway, to answer your question, I wind up I am going to go ahead and dye some just fiber before I beat it. But these were all made into sheets. And when I was in Japan, I went to another place that should be on a resource for people interested, is the Awagami factory. And they are in Tokushima, and because they are in the place where indigo has historically grown, they do have a lot of indigo, naturally dyed indigo paper there, using Kozo and Gampi. And that's, I mean, talking about my history with paper is a whole other conversation, but yeah, currently what I've been dyeing is, and you have to use something that comes from Japan called konyaku, which some of you may have heard of. It's an edible, but it also will produce strength, give the paper strength and some water resistance, so that when you dye it, your paper isn't just going to fall apart into a million pieces. Like this, I don't think I had konyaku on it, but I kind of love it because I will incorporate it into, I do a lot of kind of construction when I'm making like art pieces. So
I love that too. I love the incidental, you know, experience of making something, and when it's not quote unquote perfect, sometimes it's more beautiful, or just, you know, you just enjoy it in a different way, you see it a different way. I'm just amazed with the color. That I love that it really reflects, I think, the indie Reuben, at least on my camera.
Did you notice on that? Yes. And that was done in the scumo vat.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, I was kind of, you know, some of them, yeah, I would get that. And then the other really interesting thing, though, that I'm problem solving right now is, you know, you have to be careful in all vats, right? With whatever sludge when you have a natural vat. But what's different is, you know, we're used to, like with a 1, 2, 3 vat, if we do that kind of fermentation vat, you might have a certain color. Well, this is more of a brownish color when you pull it out of the vat. You know what I mean? It's right. Yes, and then it starts to shift. But if you don't rinse really well, you can have some of that residue. And I learned a lot with the paper, because if I'm doing, like if I used Stony Creek, which is the pigment that they've done the water process with, and I'm not, you know, right on top of it with rinsing, let's say, it's all good, but you'll get some brownish tinge. So right now I'm playing, you know, again, I'm learning, and I feel like my journey with indigo has been as a student. So yeah.
Yes, every year there's something to learn. Every year you grow, there's something new to discover. Every vat you make, right? Every single one is a new living thing. Thank you so much for sharing all these stories and all these resources. I'm so excited. I've learned so much just in hearing you talk about and hearing you share, hearing about the generosity of people who shared with you, and now you are continuing that attitude of generosity with people. That means so much. It's just what this group, I think, thrives on, is just the generosity and sharing and continuing that kind of attitude of we'll learn more if we're really open and experimental together and kind together. So thank you for being one of those people who's really influenced me. And then let's see, I want to see if I can see any more questions that have come in. A lot of people are just saying that they really love you and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Someone here commented that they couldn't hear, maybe possibly couldn't hear our video. I will check in with you later. Obviously you can't hear me if you can't hear the video, I'm sorry. But I'm gonna check in on that for you and anyone else who can't hear, and hopefully the live or the playback recording will be better. Perhaps hopefully. It's just a live connection.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, most people can hear, so that it looks like most people can hear us.
And if anybody, again, has any questions where I mean, sometimes even in a wonderful sharing group, you may feel more comfortable asking questions directly about some of this. I'm really looking forward to hearing all the other people that are going to share in this forum. And thank you so much for creating this, where we can share our passion and knowledge, and you know, it's a wonderful thing to have this. So thank you for putting the energy into doing it.
Thank you so much, Debra. And thanks again just for taking the time. We've chatted for a good while. We could keep going. I feel like we could keep
I know
going.
we could.
But for the
totally
sake
could.
of today,
Because we've been socially isolated for months.
right. But we're so excited to see the rest of your journey this season. I know you'll be sharing here in the group, and you'll be sharing how can we find
Absolutely.
out about you personally, your experiments, your projects, your website. Will you tell us how to find you and your journey?
Yes, and I will be updating my website, although generally Instagram is as little as I post. It's usually the most current as far as what's going on with my indigo processing. And
tell us your Instagram handle.
Circle of Life Studio.
And your website is the same name, yes?
Yes. And that's same for my website. And on Facebook, I'm just Debra Ketchum Jircik. And I share when I'm teaching on there. Otherwise, it's kind of everything. So
wonderful.
Okay.
Thank
you again for inviting me. I'm honored to be here and delighted to share with everybody.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone who is here joining us live, who is commenting, and who is asking questions. You can continue to ask questions even after the live is over. You can tag Debra, and if you don't, I can tag her for you. You can probably send her a message. Can people just send you a message through Facebook? Yes.
Please.
Yeah.
Facebook or Instagram, you're welcome to send me a message, and
excellent.
I will reply there.
Wonderful. I'll work on that resource list. We'll work on it together, Debra and I, to have it up for you after this live
Sounds excellent.
video ends. I am recording this live video. I did start a minute too late. I think I missed part of your first question, but we do have a recording of this video to watch later. Facebook will save the entire thing, the entire video for us. It's going in the Blue Bios album along with the other episodes. So there's 2 other episodes that have happened already this season. They're there. When you go to the top of the page, you can click on albums. So there's files, there's albums. You can click on albums, you'll see a Blue Biographies album. You'll see Debra's video there now, and all future videos will go in that album, so you can see everything kind of together as a collection. And next week, we're talking to Kathy Van Cleek in Florida. Speaking of Florida, so we're very excited to hear her story with indigo, and we hope you'll join us again. It'll be Monday again here in the group, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks again to Debra, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.